Doctor Who. 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 Doctor Who.
Patch me through to the doctor. Now!
Yes, Doctor Who. One of my absolute favorite sci-fi programs of all time. A couple of years ago, a new incarnation of the Doctor hit the screens, and there's been, shall we say at least, division among the fandom as to whether or not this particular version of the Doctor really lived up to the past incarnations that we've seen. In a series of videos, I'm going to break down each of the episodes of the Jodie Whittaker era to discuss specifically just how she really stacks up against what we've seen before and whether she lives up to the legacy that was given to her by her predecessors. We're going to start with her very first episode, The Woman Who Fell to Earth. But before we get started with that, remember to like the video, share it with your friends on social media, comment down below, let me know your thoughts, and don't forget to, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. It's one of the ways that a newer creator like myself on YouTube is able to reach a wider audience and compete with the BBCs and CBSs of the world. And now, on to the video. Ever since Christopher Eccleston graced our scenes in way back in episode Rose in 2005 with the modern reboot of the series, there's always been a few things that each Doctor does as a first when we see them for the very first time on screen, starring in their own new episode of their new series. One of the biggest, most obvious points is the Doctor's reactions to their regenerations. And it's a little bit muted when we see Eccleston first because, as we learn throughout the episode, he's actually had that particular body and face for a little while, although not horribly long. And here's what we get to see from Eccleston in regards to him examining his new appearance.
Oh, could have been worse. Look at the ears.
Interesting. So one of the things he does is he looks in the mirror, checks himself out, and remarks on his ears. He's saying, hey, the regeneration could have been worse. This reaction was a little bit muted because, as stated already, we do find out that he's been in this face for a little while, and the evidence of him showing up in history prior to this with that face was in the past, with the exception of 1963, so perhaps in some of his trips he didn't have an opportunity to really get a good look at himself. For example, we know that he was around Krakatoa and a couple other places like that, based on what we find out from Clive later in this first episode featuring Christopher Eccleston. So, okay, he's taken some time to examine his own physical appearance. We get the full treatment, though, when David Tennant steps into the role. Take a look at this.
Hello. Okay. New teeth. That's weird. How do I look?
Different.
Am I ginger?
No, you just sort of brown.
Yeah, I wanted to be ginger. I've never been ginger.
Never been ginger. Oh, man, that was just a wonderful, wonderful piece of acting that we were treated to from David Tennant. And it was just the embodiment in many ways of the Doctor that he would be. And you can see the Doctor's extreme concern for his appearance. So how did that play out when we made the change from Smith to Tennant? Let's take a look.
Hard work's too. Blimey. I'm a girl. No. I'm still not ginger.
Geronimo! Not only do we get a great reaction to Smith checking out his new body there, but we also get instantly introduced to his personality and his tagline right off the bat. Great scene. Had to condense it for reasons related to copyright claims, but you got an extended edition of Smith being very, very concerned about his new appearance. He checked out his legs, his hands, his fingers, his chin, his ears, nose, the whole bang, and was even horrified at the thought that he might actually be a woman. All right. Matt Smith finally closes out his tenure as the Doctor with the gift of a new cycle of regenerations from the Time Lords in the Time of the Doctor Christmas special. And bam! In comes Capaldi. Let's see how Capaldi dealt with it through this whopper of a regeneration.
Kidneys! How can you kidneys? I don't like the colour.
Why they choose this face?
It's like I'm trying to tell myself something.
These are attack eyebrows. You can take bottle tops off with these.
They are mighty eyebrows indeed, sir.
Scottish.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things. I can really complain about things now. I don't know, but I probably blame the English.
I can really complain about things now. That scene lasted a good 5 to 6 minutes during Deep Breath, Capaldi's initial episode as the Doctor, and really, really dove into the intricacies of his appearance and his feeling that he had chosen the face for a specific reason, which of course was a great nod to the fact that Capaldi had played Cecilus in the Pompeii episode during the Tennant era with Donna Noble. Diving right into that and showing the Doctor's obsession with his appearance, asking the bum if he'd ever seen this face before, and because he was sure that he had, it was, once again, an extreme obsession with how he looked and why he looked by it, and, yet again, a reveal of the Doctor's personality in many ways. And now we come to Jodie Whittaker, the first female Doctor, played by Jodie.
Why are you calling me madam?
Because you're a woman?
Am I? Does it suit me? What? Sorry, half an hour ago I was a white-haired Scotsman.
And that's basically it. Every previous incarnation spent a great deal of time examining themselves, wanting to understand how they look, making comments on it, checking to make sure everything was okay, trying to understand what was happening to them. And that was it. That was all we got from the first female Doctor played by Jodie Whittaker. Just this brief commentary and asking if it suited her. No examination of her body, no nothing. It was a letdown, right? I mean, like, you really took the air out of the excitement that is the regeneration of a Doctor. There was no level of curiosity that we got to see here, and it just wasn't even close to what the predecessors did. For me, despite the fact that The Woman Who Fell to Earth is one of the best episodes of the Jodie era, this transition, which should have been the most monumental of any the Doctor has ever been through, was merely a blip on the radar. And it was just so gosh darn disappointing. Okay, so the regeneration examination wasn't all that good. Okay, maybe they did everything else all right. Maybe that was just a blip due to inexperienced writers or a showrunner that maybe just didn't quite have his feel yet. But another major event that many Doctors have experienced over the years is the getting a new sonic screwdriver. The sonic screwdriver is the Doctor's multi-tool. It's like a Swiss Army knife. It can do just about anything that he needs it to do. One of the coolest examples of what the Sonic can do was during the Day of the Doctor 50th anniversary special, where John Hurt's War Doctor started running a calculation in the door where he and Smith and Tennant were imprisoned in order to disintegrate the door, and it was something that was going to take hundreds and hundreds of years to complete. Good news, you got 3 Doctors in the same room, with Hurt being the youngest, so he starts the calculation in the sonic screwdriver. Well, you know what? David Tennant's screwdriver still running the calculation because it was permanently embedded into the software, which was the same throughout all the screwdrivers. And then, of course, Matt Smith's doctor, who is several hundred years older than John Hurt's, checks his screwdriver and the calculations were complete. One of the many, many amazing things that this device can do. So it's a big deal when the doctor gets a new screwdriver. David Tennant did not receive a new screwdriver during his tenure, although it did have some changes to its appearance. There wasn't really any kind of formal new device reveal. So the first one we got to see during the modern era of the show was this with Matt Smith.
Oh, a new one. Lovely.
Thanks, dear. That's right. The new Sonic was made for the Doctor by the TARDIS herself, whom the Doctor has referred to as she, as well as a few other things over the years. So the TARDIS created Matt Smith's Doctor's new screwdriver. Let's take a look at the delivery of a new screwdriver to Peter Capaldi after he did finally, mostly, retire the Sonic sunglasses. Once again, a very cool piece of machinery delivered to the Doctor when he needed it by the TARDIS herself. Capaldi, clearly very, very pleased with what he'd gotten, checked out its function, and in his own way was a happy, happy man. So, how did Jodie arrive at her new screwdriver? Let's take a look.
Should be fine.
So, as a result of not having her TARDIS, Jodie decided to make her own sonic screwdriver using a bunch of parts that were around in the shop that they happened to be in. And she produced the new tool all by herself. It was actually kind of a rather long montage of her performing the work to create the screwdriver, but once again, you can only use clips of a certain length without getting at risk of drawing too much attention to yourself. So, there are a number of things that are troublesome about using this approach to deliver the new screwdriver to Jodie. One of the first of these being that when her predecessors were without their screwdrivers, what that actually did for them was drive a more innovative and challenging story in order for them to come to a resolution. They no longer had the Swiss Army knife screwdriver that could help them out in whatever situations that they found themselves in. When the Doctor is without his screwdriver, a lot of times it creates a more interesting and more challenging problem for him to solve. But in this case, for whatever reason, the showrunner decided, presumably to demonstrate that Jodie's a fully capable, brilliant person, that she would just go ahead and make the screwdriver herself, rather than having it produced for her by the TARDIS, as her predecessors had experienced. All right, Jake, all right. So they made some pretty radical departures from the past in terms of how the Doctor approaches having a new body from regeneration. And they made a pretty radical departure from the past in how the Doctor arrived at having a new screwdriver. Two very important things throughout Doctor Who history and in the lore, just steeped and deep in the history over the past 57 years. But what about one of those other quintessential moments that defines a Doctor? I would tell you that is often their very first confrontation with their very first enemy in each of their very first episodes. In many ways, each of those confrontations truly defined who these Doctors were. And generally, you see this hardcore, this spine and this grit that lies underneath the carefree Doctor that we often see. Let's take a look at how Christopher Eccleston, the Ninth Doctor, approached this.
Oh, don't give me that. This is an invasion, plain and simple. Don't talk about constitutional rights. I am talking!
Confidence, authority, and fortitude. Many things that truly, truly defined the fantastic Christopher Eccleston as the Doctor. You saw who he was in this very, very moment When confronted by the Nestene consciousness, he didn't flinch, and he made absolutely certain that everyone knew who he was and what he represented. Let's take a look at how his immediate successor, David Tennant, handled his first great challenge.
You want to know the best bit? This new hand. It's a fighting hand. No second chances. I'm that sort of a man.
Then make sure that you tell them this. It is defended.
It is defended. Now that is some pretty serious fire. And I'll tell you what, it was quite possible that that was never going to be matched. But much to everybody's great surprise, we saw this amazing performance by Matt Smith.
Is this world protected? And what you've got to ask is,
What happened to them?
hello, I'm the Doctor. Basically, run.
Basically, run. Despite being a more lighthearted take on the Doctor, Smith still showed grit and a hardcore and an ability to fight, something that was really highlighted in the great episode A Good Man Goes to War. Smith was lighthearted and airy, but when the rubber hit the road, the man was hard. And he showed it to us in his very first episode, without a Sonic, I might add. Coming off of those two performances, knowing who Peter Capaldi was, you just knew the man was going to give you something special. And we got to see this.
Those people down there, they're never small to me. Don't make assumptions about how far I will go to protect them, because I've already come a very long way.
You realize, of course, one of us is lying about our basic programming. And I think we both know who that is.
Capaldi could say more with that look into the camera than a lot of actors could do in their entire lifetime. The man just had presence. There wasn't an episode where he was not in command, and the authority and just the projection again of the certitude that we saw, similar to what was exhibited by Eccleston, simply just oozed from Capaldi in that final scene of Deep Breath. And we got to see an even more amazing performance for him later in the amazing episode that he ran all by himself in Hellbent. In fairness to Jodie, following that was a hell of a tall order. But let's see what she gave us here in the first episode.
If I don't stop you, your people will keep doing this. Tim Shaw, the wannabe leader who has to cheat because he knows he's unworthy. See, that's why I know you won't detonate. I'm the Doctor. Sorting out fair play throughout the universe. Now, please, get off this planet while you still have a choice.
Sorting out fair play throughout the universe. Definitely a change, which in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing by any stretch. And I'll definitely give Jodie that this was one of her best performances of her run. She definitely established where the line was, and that if you crossed over the line and crossed her, there'd be a problem. So I'll give her that all day long. This truly was a decent initial villain confrontation out of Jodie, and she did comport herself reasonably well in it. Well, there you go. 3 or 4 very, very major events that a new Doctor may or may not experience during their tenure, and a comparison side by side, directly one after the other, of how each of the modern Doctors dealt with those situations. So what's the final verdict after watching The Woman Who Fell to Earth, the very first episode of Jodie Whittaker, who plays the first female Doctor? Well, you know, as far as Jodie's entire run goes, this was not a bad episode. There were several areas within it where I would say that both Jodie and Chibnall, as the showrunner and the lead writer, really departed very, very drastically from traditional Who. And the show was weaker for it. Not having an examination of who she was. Not, finding a way to win without the Sonic and using her brain more than gadgets in order to get her through things. They could have used it as an area of strength for Jodie instead of deciding to play to the she's smart, capable, and able by making her own screwdriver. It would have been, to me, a lot better of an approach to have her have to figure her way out of this with her wits alone. Now, her final confrontation with the villain was not too bad. I mean, sorting out fair play, not what we've seen from the traditional Doctor whatsoever. Every Doctor that preceded her in the modern series had a grit and a core and an assertiveness and a strength that is a lot different in Jodie. Not that different is necessarily bad, but when the shit goes down, the Doctor needs to be Earth's defender. And it didn't get that with the same gravitas, particularly that you saw from Tennant and Capaldi. So overall, they just failed to live up to the predecessors in this episode, but it wasn't awful. I mean, honestly, giving it a true relook 3 years later, I'm going to have to give this one about a 6.5, maybe even a 7 out of 10. If things had kept going at this level, we might have been okay. But unfortunately, we're going to get to jump into the Ghost Monument next week, where things do indeed begin to go downhill. First, I'd like to say thank you for sticking around all the way to the end of the video, and I really do appreciate you listening this long. Please don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends on social media. Please consider subscribing to the channel to see more and additional content as I continue to go through a side-by-side comparison of the first female Doctor played by Jodie Whittaker and see how she stacks up against her predecessors on a week-by-week basis. If you didn't like what you had to heard, by God, I do appreciate you sticking around and listening anyway. Please leave me a comment below the video and let me know what your thoughts are. Thanks, and I'll catch you on the next video.